I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Who is here is whom you already know, Joe Maciariello, who did one of our breakouts, 26 years down the hallway from Peter Drucker and collaborated with Peter on some of his books, has written some of his own books, including 52-chapter, 52-week book of synthesis of Drucker's work. And then we know David from the talk that he just did, one of his most recent books, The Why of Work, and sought after in HR circles and working on some new innovative thinking in the leadership side. So I'm very excited to have these two gentlemen, professors at major universities in the country, and gosh, so many decades of understanding and knowledge about leadership. And I asked my friend Philip Paul to join us because Philip is not only a brilliant entrepreneur and leader, he's a friend, but he's started a new company called Contribute. And Contribute is a company that helps teams to coalesce around the notion of giving through an innovative portal that he's created that is driving meaning and purpose in the team portal through this vehicle of giving. So we're going to talk about some things for a while, and you'll have lots of time to text in your questions and just interact. But I thought I would begin with just kind of posing the question. David, you wrote the book, The Why of Work. Joe, you've written a lot and thought a lot with Peter Drucker on the notion of people. Mm-hmm. And Philip, you are creating this portal that helps people to have meaning in their work. So maybe, David, if I could start with you, what would you say is the thing, if you were to be engaged by the average CEO who's sitting out here and come to their company, what would you probably instinctively know might be a blind spot in their leadership equation?
First, none of the CEOs here are average, so let me correct the faux pas. I think we often, as CEOs, judge the world through our eyes, not the eyes of those we serve. And so you see a CEO who may have a different life experience than the people they're bringing in. A quick example, we did a survey once in a big company, an employee engagement survey, and one of the questions is, to what extent are your individual differences treated with dignity and respect? A diversity question. Mm-hmm. We went to the top 10 people, and their average score was 4.8 out of 5. And they all patted themselves on the back. And we said, not so quick. When you look at women, 4.3. Women who are single, 3.8. Women who are single of color, 3.3. In other words, you're judging yourself by your experience, and you're not able to see the experience of others who are there. And be really careful of that.
Joe, thoughts?
Yeah. I'm reading that question on the prompt there, and what I would want to say really ties into this. What is righteous anger in the context of leadership? And I think it has to do with, let me give you an example. You may have seen Ken Burns' recent film on Jackie Robinson. I've been struggling with the first part of that story, which was turning the other cheek, and the other part of that story, which was righteous anger, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I'm not a judge on righteous anger, and I know anger is dangerous. But the storyline behind that is something Drucker was very proactive about in subtle ways. He never put a big microphone out and said, this is really important. But this idea of dignity, which Service Master majors on, the inherent dignity that we have as human beings, and the dignity we can give or take away in our workplace, and respect. Those two things, and recognition for what the person is doing.
Yeah.
And how worthy it is.
So ascribing dignity and worth to service
respect,
workers.
And worth.
Yeah.
Well, not only service workers, but here you have a man who ultimately, between the executive, Branch Rickey, a great executive, and the ball player, Jackie Robinson, not only influenced Major League Baseball, but they influenced the culture. He was about 20 years ahead of Martin Luther King. So the power of giving people dignity, or reinforcing the inherent dignity, and respecting them, and attributing worth to them, and giving them equal opportunity. We just throw these terms around. They're big deals. This is a big deal. Okay?
What would you guys say is one thing, David or Joe or Philip, what would you say is one thing we can do to get that out of the ethereal? So ascribing dignity and worth to people, what could we do Monday morning when we get back to the office to ascribe dignity and worth to people we work with?
If I could respond to that, Greg. It's interesting, before we got started, with Co-Tribute, you referred to that, we talked about 100 different companies, all sizes, shapes, and forms, publicly traded companies, convened companies, all these companies. And we looked at, what we asked the leaders, what do you do to engage employees? What is your perspective of your leadership? And
What
then
do you do to engage employees?
To engage employees and really to provide meaning and purpose. And then we also asked the employees. It was very interesting to touch on, Dave's point here, that there was a disconnect between how we as CEOs perceive ourselves and how our employees, perceive us, and there's a big, big disconnect. So I think, one of my takeaways would be after a conference like this is to really go back and listen more intently. I think we had a breakout session on that, is listen to our employees to really, get into their shoes, their perspective. Because, for me, that's the tendency, is I have my own perspective based on, years of, leading a company.
Yeah, so listening. David,
I would have a 4-word question, very specific. When an employee comes to me with a question or a problem, what do you think?
What do you think?
And put it back on the employee.
Yeah.
And then silence on our part.
Yeah, that gives respect.
I'm being silent right now.
Yes.
That gives respect.
Yeah.
Good. That's good.
Well, how about a question from the audience? Will Mr. Ulrich's slides be available? Yes.
Yes. Only if you sign up for more convened courses.
There you go.
I think that's what I was supposed to say.
That's right. That's the right answer. So many exciting ideas to begin to implement. One problem. How do I find the margin to execute on all of them? I bet you I know what Joe Maciariello is thinking right now. Maybe. Drucker said something about if you have more than 5 goals.
Yeah, you have too many. But the issue is one Bill Pollard raised. Priorities. What's the key priority? What's the key thing? And separate the urgent, the important from the urgent. Try to separate them. I keep Charlie Hummel's pamphlet, The Tyranny of the Urgent, right below. It used to be below my telephone. Now it's below my computer. And I try to remind myself of the things coming in over the transit. What is really important here? And what as opposed to the noise. Where's the information in the signal here?
Thoughts? Too many things to do. How do I prioritize what I have to execute on?
So, I think most people here, live that on a day-by-day basis, right? So I think part of it is, as I was listening to Dave and Joe yesterday in the breakout session, I was reminded of sort of, Peter Drucker's, principle about the power of purpose and how purpose gives energy and, to everything else that's done. I think one of the things that happens is, we get caught in the tyranny of the urgent. So I think part of it is, for us, Greg, you've seen I've been with Convene for 10 years. I think the focus day, the days that we actually meet as a group are really days when we help, determine, with counsel from others on what are the important things to work on. And it's usually some of these things that don't show up on a task list, but things that we have to do on a regular basis.
Yeah. So David, in your book, The Why of Work, and you talk about this notion of people want meaning when they come to work, what would you say if everybody's assenting to that idea? Yes, I want my employees to feel like they have meaning when they come to work. What would be something from your research that they could do on Monday to begin to ascribe meaning to the workplace?
I'm going to go back and answer 2 questions at once. One of the things that we've learned that good leaders have the capacity to do is to zoom out and see more ideas and to zoom in and focus. And knowing when to zoom out and knowing when to zoom in is key. If I come to this meeting with an answer, I've already focused, I've got to zoom out. And so doing that becomes, I think, a real leadership gift. How do I zoom in on the key things? How do I find meaning? It was interesting when two blind men went to the Savior to be healed. He said, "What would you do? What would you have me do for you?" And I think we find meaning by allowing our employees to ask the question, what is it that would be meaningful to me? And the reason I say that is I'm amazed how different it is. We tried once to buy houses for people we knew. We failed every time. The people that we thought would use a little condo downtown wanted a country house. The people that we thought wanted a country house. So instead of prescribing what is meaningful to people, I think the question Jesus asked the blind man, what would you have me do? And I think we can ask our employees, what is it that would be meaningful for you? Is it vision? Is it opportunity? Is it money? Money can still be a motivator. Is it communication? Is it involvement? What is it that would be the most, is it flexibility? What is it that would be the most meaningful to you? And let the employee guide us rather than us guide him or her.
Joe, what would Drucker say? What would you say?
I think the making of meaning is really critical. And he didn't quite put it all that way, although he did talk about meaning in the latter part of his life. But he tied it to purpose and mission and the sense of call. I saw it in his life, this deep sense of call as to what he was called to do. And it was a wonderful divider between what was important versus what was urgent. And so yeah, I think it comes with a sense of I'll put it call. I think business is a calling. I think management is a calling. And what are you called to do? What are your values? And how do you link that up? And your leaders can help a great deal, right? And linking that up. And then there is a real force, a real power when you link that up. Bill said in an early draft, excuse me, of Soul of the Firm, which I read, when here, although Drucker didn't write it in exactly these terms, he and Bill were involved in working out a lot of this stuff. Bill said when the image of God is let go within the workplace, enormous power is generated. And we have to look at what that is and just what that is. And that's a big subject in itself, but it really does come down to a few things. But the call, purpose, meaning, the image of God and human beings, unleashing that. Right? Yeah.
I remember in the early Service Master days, some of the very evangelical, which is a good thing, Christians that I hired thought their job was to evangelize our customers' employees. So we would serve hospitals, and they'd be up sharing the gospel with a nurse on the 6th floor. And I would say, we actually don't pay you to share the gospel with the nurse on the 6th floor. We pay you to run the physical plant of this hospital and make sure the food is acceptable, make sure it's clean, and the laundry's done, and all that. And some people need to grasp that just because we're followers of Christ doesn't mean we're supposed to pull out a tract every 5 minutes.
What are you getting paid for, right? You're serving a customer, right? What's value to the customer, right?
Right.
And produce that. Yeah, that's what's godly in that situation, right?
Yeah.
And then if the customer sees something he likes or she likes, then you will.
Yeah. One of our partners, Refer.com, has a great software product that's helping us to reach out to people with a touch, right? And so this notion of, David, if you like sports and I knew you like sports, then maybe I should send you something that's related to sports that you might like to read. And if I do that a number of times, you begin to get the picture that I actually appreciate and like you, instead of calling you and saying, David, I need 3 referrals. Right? And just doing that is how God would, I think, act, how Jesus would act. He kept being with people and touching people and being involved with them and putting his arm around them and healing them and doing all these things. He didn't always just run around and say, you need to be saved in the next 5 minutes.
I don't think God or Jesus has a data center in the cloud. I think what they have is a capacity to treat each of us from where we are today.
Yeah.
And I don't think they have a big data center. That isn't God.
Yeah.
For me, God is somebody who knows me, and he knows you. And he customizes, he personalizes that relationship.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm hoping that God isn't doing statistics. Because I don't want to be a statistic. I want to be a relationship with the divine.
Yeah. Philip, what's happening at Cotribute when people are engaged in your platform and in theory, we're ascribing some more meaning to the workplace, but what's happening in practice?
It's interesting, Greg, if I could back up just a minute. If you saw the research that Dave put up in terms of business benefits and employee engagement, you move employee engagement by 10% and your business performance goes up. I read an interesting quote by a gentleman named Daniel Pink, who does a lot of research in this area as well, and he says, there's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And because science actually proves, there's empirical research that proves, benefits, but yet, when I'm a businessman, it's hard for me to actually do it, and there's a disconnect. So if you look at the whole concept of, human flourishing, employees being developed, empowering employees, I think part of that is also giving them choices in terms of, where to volunteer, where to do what, where to give, where is their, heart connection. And to Dave's point, it's really not about prescribing something, but giving them a way for them to actually make choices that are in line with who they are and what their, calling is. So that's how we at least look at it.
Yeah, when you talk about the image of God in human beings, certainly it includes decision making and responsibility and freedom to do that within the bounds of the information they have and whether it's the right domain for them to make the decision.
Yes.
Do they see enough?
That's so fascinating, and it's so basic.
It's basic,
right? If at Service Master,
it's hard to work out.
We used to say at Service Master, we say people were created in the image of God, therefore people are creative. Since people are creative, we should allow them to be creative. Now that really makes sense, doesn't it? But here's what happens in practice. People are made in the image of God, yes. He made me the leader, so I should tell everybody what to do. Oops. And that would mean that all the creativity of all the people who work for us is erased. The only person that is creative is the CEO. And you would say that would take away all the dignity of the...
a lot of the strength of most of the strength of the organization, right? That's a silly thing.
I had a pastor friend of mine who had his senior pastor come to him and say, you need to understand how things work around here. God speaks to me and I tell you what to do.
Well, that's the Moses model.
And 2 months later, he was fired.
I coached a business leader. He brought me in and he said, here's my philosophy. How would you coach me? Designed by geniuses, implemented by idiots. And I said, quit. That's my coaching. Very dysfunctional.
I had another friend of mine
May
say...
I ask Joe a question?
Yes.
Sure. Joe, you had a privilege of working with somebody who is as prescient and as insightful as Peter Drucker.
Yeah.
He lived, I don't know when he died, it was a number of years ago.
He died in 2005.
It was not that long ago.
November.
But if he was alive today in 2016, I don't know if he'd teach us what he taught in 1990. So knowing that his gift was learning and growing and adapting, what do you think he'd be teaching us
that's really
today?
a great point.
Wow.
That's really a great point.
Because it's so easy
I'm
to say, here's
working
what
on
Peter
that.
Drucker did, let's do it. I think he had a gift of...
I agree with you, Dave. I've used his own paradigm, and that's continuity and change. Okay. That is, what is it in Peter Drucker's work that is solid? I think it's human nature. I think it's people.
Wow.
Okay. What is it that changes? Well, I look at the effective executive, and I go through all those, information technology.
Well, your book is phenomenal. Let me just
The book is
It is
phenomenal,
phenomenal.
and it has a lot of wisdom in it right now. But if you get down to how people manage time, how how they make decisions and how Watson and cognitive computing and some of these things Peter anticipated. He would be aghast if we didn't take advantage of them, right? Making the connections. The very heart of Drucker was this ability to make connections, as what he called a socioeconomic. Well, if Watson achieves its potential, that will extend our ability in cognitive computing to make connections, right?
Interesting.
Perhaps gain some of the insight. Now, I have talked to some of the people who are close to that, and they say, we're not quite there yet. So I would agree with you. There's things to hold on to, and there's things to change.
I just, and again, I wish we had you're the embodiment of his ideas. So
try.
I think he'd be worried about the gig economy. Gig, G-I-G, free agent. Let's Uberize everything. Everybody go be a free agent, work in your basement. I think he'd say there is value in community.
Yeah, there is.
There is value in coming
together.
together.
See, you have knowledge work there, and everybody's specialized.
Yep.
Like I'm working as a sole entrepreneur, more or less, in a research function right now, research teaching. And yet I need organizations to help.
Good.
Right? Help with the inputs, to help deliver, right? So in this knowledge world, he saw the job of the executive is integrating the specialties.
Nice.
Right? So yeah, we need community. We can't be apart. And plus the sociological reasons.
Yeah.
We need people. Right? Yeah.
Well, I suppose Jesus could have said, listen, you guys all stay where you are. I'll come see you every few months and see how you're doing. Instead, he said, why don't you come and we'll live together, eat together, sleep together, walk
I
together.
love the come and see. Come join our community.
Yes.
Be a part of something that's greater than you as an individual.
Yes.
And I worry about that in our economy. As we get more data, we begin to force folks into isolated sets of personal agendas. And yet there is power in coming together. And
Well, one of the great benefits that I've had in being associated with Drucker is that I've met some phenomenal people. Ken Wilson, who's now passed away, was a reader of Drucker's, a 20-year reader of Drucker's work. And he was a Nobel Prize winner in 1981 in physics. And he was reading Drucker in order to, when he moved from Cornell to Ohio State, by the way, sorry.
Oopsie! Erase that from the tape.
His wife got a job in the computer center.
well said.
So, yeah, when he was at Columbus, he said some amazing things to me, and I'm kind of, where were we going?
No, it's good. You were talking about the...
Oh, yeah. Oh, and the big issue was, how are we going to put together a research function to even try to match what Drucker has done and do it in a way that's consistent with the future. In his idea, and this is what he did in his to arrive at the Nobel Prize, he worked with the brightest minds possible in this field area of physics, quantum physics, thermodynamics, and they were working on a problem at Cornell, and they solved the problem, and then he went off and took 2 weeks and wrote up the paper that the Nobel Committee cited him for. It came out of community.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so yes, especially in research, right?
Yeah.
Maybe with all of our faces in our screens and our individual performance work, we miss just the gathering. I love one of the things Lori Beth Jones says in her Jesus CEO book is he ate with his staff. Yeah. And I worked with somebody one time so long ago that lunch was always with his door closed with a bag of chips. And I kind of thought, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Because Jesus usually didn't eat by himself. He got everybody together and had food together. He could have made it so we didn't need to eat, but he made it so we need to eat. And he said community is important, and I think those two things work well together.
In fact, after he resurrected, he not only ate, he prepared the meal.
There you go.
You come to the cook fire of Christ,
right.
and you join him at his cook fire. I mean, what a remarkable metaphor. The Son of God, the Savior, he's redeemed, he's resurrected. He's cooking the fish.
Yeah.
The Emmaus Road experience, the idea of the burning heart, right? Now, I've experienced that in my life to some extent. In my relationship to Christ. I also experienced it with Peter Drucker. I would often leave. I worked with him mostly during the time he was ill, directly with him during the time he was ill, 99 to 2005, 2006 almost. And you know, I would get together in his lanai, in his home, and we would discuss a project, and he would lay out the plans, and I would talk, and he would put the thing together, and so on. I would leave there with the sign, kind of an infusion of what he would call the spirit of performance, you know, that I was really ignited. Well, what was it? Well, I don't know, but he found it out. Okay? He found it out. He knew. He was an observer. He watched people, right? What was it that ignited me? Well, something in this interaction.
Yeah.
And I think we can learn from that, to observe people and to find out, you know, what can ignite their. For example, we were having some discussion on how to pronounce my name. My grandfather's brother changed it when he came over here from Italy to Miller, from Maciariello. Well, of course, the root is machinist, and Miller is a machine. You know, it's a machinist. Yeah, and I walked into Drucker's house one day, and he says, "Maciariello," you know, it's a beautiful Italian. He's the only one who knew my name.
Oh,
knew how to
my.
pronounce it. Okay, so there was something striking, you know, connecting about that.
Wow.
It's wow. Yeah.
Wow. And then there was the time that he
Well, with my
spent
son,
3.5
that was
hours or something.
that
with
was
your son?
really that was really amazing. Peter Drucker had you know, this comes from a vast knowledge base, and you're accumulating. Looks like you're accumulating. Where he was able to talk to a person about his or her problems and connect the dots. And here's the example. I said, Pat, you know, we got this appointment with Drucker, and I was against my better will. And you got to come with a question, you know. So the question was, how do you do private equity in Eastern Europe?
This was your son's
my son,
your
Pat.
son's
Yeah,
question.
my son
Yep.
is a partner in a private equity firm.
And you were saying, basically, if you're going to meet with Peter Drucker,
You better have
better
a
get
question.
your act together
Yeah,
before
you're
you
not
get
going to
there.
just gab.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that meeting will be over pretty soon. You know, politely,
Yeah.
it'll be over. But and so Peter started to talk, and he started to put stitches in along the way, and he put 4 or 5 stitches in a 3-hour meeting, and bang, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, don't when you look at a company, don't write down how they should be managed. Find out how they are managed. Do the forensic accounting. You know, make banking relationships. And with regard to Eastern Europe, be careful of the corruption. You know, and look at quality. Look at the product. You know, things like that. Wow. He jumped out. My son jumped. Well, there were 5 points, by the way. My son jumped out. It was amazing how we could connect the dots in a 3-hour period while he was thinking. And that's the skill that is needed, I think, in this connecting the dots. I don't know who's doing it today for the economy, for the country. Yeah.
Well, can we jump to a question from the audience? So, can you comment on the perception of compensation and worth for today's millennial employees? As you perceive, what are they really seeking?
I can start off, Greg, based on our discussions with
Since
companies.
your whole office is millennials.
Yeah, right. So the thing is, I think it's really hard to generalize, as always. But, and like Dave said, money is an important, factor in the compensation part. But more and more we see that purpose is a big driver. There's studies that have come out of Stanford that say, MBA graduates are willing to take, a job that gives them meaning and purpose at a much lower compensation. So there's more and more studies that are coming about that. And then the second thing is the whole concept of a team community that's making an impact. Impact is a big thing. Mm-hmm. You see so many social enterprises being started, by millennials because the need to make a difference. I think Gabriella talked about it yesterday. There's an innate desire to say, hey, I want my work to be meaningful and I want to make an impact. And we see that in, even in some of our, children. But I think that's there. But, so compensation, I think the meaning and purpose is a bigger part than what it would be, I think, for regular employees. But you can't reduce, reduce it to just that.
Others? Any other thoughts? We have a number of questions in front of us, so we can keep going.
I'll be real quick. One of the things I love to do is, in my training, is taxonomy. It's take the complex and make it simple. When we looked at that research on commitment, we found 6 things, and it stands for voice. Vision, that's purpose. Opportunity to learn and to grow. Incentive, which is real money. Impact, doing something that makes a difference. Community. And then the last one was, we called it entrepreneurship or flexibility. Giving you the flexible time, dress. Anyway, those are the things that we summarize from that research.
Wow, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. So give them a voice. I love that.
Give them a voice.
Here's an easy one for you, Philip. Can co-tributes system where the employer contributes into a pool of money that the employees give away, and I'll let you explain while you answer, accept funds from National Christian Foundation?
Yes, it does. It sits on top of National Christian Foundation or any other corporate foundation. We found a lot of large companies have their own corporate foundation, so it just sits on top of that.
Okay, so give us the quick elevator speech on how co-tribute works.
So if you know National Christian Foundation, co-tribute is to companies what NCF is to Christians. That's essentially what it is. If I could, share an analogy, it was Rick McCarthy, one of the convene chairs, who, challenged me about 5 years ago. He said, "Hey, Philip, I know, culture and generosity is an important thing. How are you doing that with your employees?" And really, we weren't. We thought that the right hand shouldn't know what the left hand was doing, and that was it. And Rick kept challenging us. And to show his, point, if you look at, giving meaning and purpose, we went and asked employees, "What would you like to do?" And they said, "We'd like to get a decision, a say in what happened." So that's what we did. And the stories that came out were just incredible, how people, took what they were given and then leveraged it based on their passion, based on, their calling.
Let's jump on the other young leader question here while we're at it. What advice and wisdom would you give to those of us who are young leaders that lead people older and more experienced than us? Younger leaders who lead people older and more experienced, what advice do you have for the young leader?
Talk slowly.
Show respect.
And loudly.
Okay, show respect.
Yeah, show respect for what that person has accomplished.
Yeah.
Don't text them a question. Any other thoughts? Okay, go ahead.
I think, an attitude of humility and learning, I think, would be important, Greg, because, to Joe's point, there is wisdom and experience. So, that's what, that would be important, I think.
I was, here's what not to do. How's that? I think I was all of 22, 23 years old and started with Service Master in Southern California, Gardena Memorial Hospital, and we were in charge of the physical plant. That's pretty important in a hospital, that the operating theater doesn't go down in a power failure. We were responsible for housekeeping, pretty important, laundry, food service, and I had a ex-Navy guy. I'll never forget his name. I won't repeat it on tape. But he was an ex-Navy guy, and I said I wanted to meet with him at such and such a time in the future. He was probably 50-something years old, and he didn't like the time that I had suggested. And he slammed down his coffee cup, looked me right in the eyes and said, "Listen to me, buddy. First of the month, I punch the clock, I get a check from the Navy. I don't need this job, and if you want to meet me, you meet me at 6 o'clock tomorrow, I'll make the coffee." So I was there 6 o'clock the next day, that you could stand a spoon up in the coffee, and we had a great talk. But what he didn't want to hear from me is, "You're going to meet me, this little 22-year-old kid, on my time frame." So I think what you say is exactly right. Respect is so important. Okay, here's another question. What is the most serious threat to leadership today? Wow. This is the simple questions, right?
Yeah, simple.
Whoever sent that one in.
I think Dave put his finger on it. earlier, and it's not paying attention to the people you're serving, but seeking to fulfill your own needs.
As I think about that very tough question, it would be some sense of personal pride and arrogance that you think leadership is about you. And it's the same answer. It's leadership narcissism. I think that's a big threat because leaders, it sounds like your experience with Drucker with your son. Here's what I take from that. Not that your son learned the 3 to-dos, but your son felt better about himself.
He was enabled.
He was enabled. That's a better word. Thank you.
Yeah.
That good leaders enable others. It isn't, they create energy. They don't absorb energy. They're not black holes. They create energy. And I think the personal pride, the narcissism, I think sucks the energy out of a room.
One of the, sticking with this theme, one of the other experiences I was able to give to my son was to meet with Bill for breakfast in Downers Grove. And we came into a meeting and a breakfast meeting, and we had breakfast and all. And my son said, "Yeah, I know, Dad. I'm supposed to shut up." Bill was very polite, but Bill went around the downstairs there at Downers Grove where the 4 objectives are, and he knew everybody's name. I mean, no matter if they were cleaning the floor, right? He remembered that.
Absolutely.
He remembers that.
Yeah.
And names are hard for me.
Me too.
They're really hard. And I don't think they're easy for Bill, but he worked at it.
Yeah, you work at it. Yeah. He
Greg,
taught me to reach out and touch a service worker and say, "Thank you so much."
Yeah.
And that came from watching Bill, really.
Greg, I don't know you that well, but I have deep respect for what I've seen. You've spent months planning this conference. You've talked to us as speakers, you've coached us, you've guided us with wisdom. You've now sat through 2 days. If there were 1 or 2 messages you hope the people who've invested and trusted you with their time, what are the messages you hope we go home with?
Well, thanks. Thanks for asking. I think it is along the lines of this question that people actually matter to God. And when you juxtapose that with the fact that we often get it wrong as leaders, that God does in fact speak to us solely, therefore we are to disseminate his truth to everyone else, it does mean that means you erase the creativity and leadership component and capacity in your entire team. So if he doesn't speak to you alone, he speaks to everyone. That means everyone has value. That means we need to figure out how to value everybody and listen to everybody. And so the balance beam over there and the one that's on your table essentially is saying that, yes, people actually matter. But as Bill was appropriately saying, it doesn't matter in solidarity. There has to be profit, there has to be excellence, and it has to be all on the fulcrum of faith.
If you go by businesses that have closed down, you ask yourself, how many people are crying about that? Right? The businesses that serve the public are those that are profitable.
Here's another question from the audience. Millennials are purported to be less connected to their Christian values that underpin what made America great. What impact will that have? I think the rest of the question that's not there is on our future. So if millennials may, I'm not sure if that's exactly right, may not be connected to Judeo-Christian values, what impact will that have on the future? It is true, the Barna stats, that we've gone from 40% to 17% of people who attend church in some way. And the other Barna stat that's crazy fascinating is that only 9% of people in the country who say they're faith-based Christians read their Bible, go to church, or pray. So what do we do about that?
I think of Chuck Smith and the Jesus people. Chuck didn't want to go down and preach to them. That was his wife's idea, as I understand it. But and I'm sure this is going on, right? And they're trying to figure out how to connect, right? How to connect this gospel message that's changing. I mean, that meets all the kinds of needs, right? But remains the same.
Yeah.
How do you connect it with these young people?
Yeah.
So I'm sure pastors like Chuck Smith and others with the Jesus people are trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say my answer to that question is that they may be unconnected when they walk through the door of your office the first day, but I hope by about the 100th day they're not unconnected anymore because they see Jesus in you. So that would be my thought.
I mean, I think Jesus had a great answer. I am the way, the truth, and the light. And that when you know the truth, it will set you free.
Yeah.
And I don't think the millennials see that. I don't think they see truth as an enabling feature. They see it as a constraining feature. And if we can help people see that knowing the truth is liberating, it's enabling, it's empowering, it helps them get what they want rather than constraining their choices. That
Jesus was smart, as Dallas Willard would say.
That's a
and
good line, by the way.
You're
Jesus was smart. That's
and you're
very
applying
good.
moral knowledge. You're saying, hey, look, there's knowledge here. If you had knowledge of health, wouldn't you want to take it in? Yeah. Jesus knows the truth. He knows the way. And there's something testable here.
And it's liberating. It's freeing.
It's freeing. Yeah.
I think some people get a mindset that church constrains rather than enriches. And we don't constrain. When we know, when we are complimented by the Holy Spirit, and when it affirms to us what we're doing, that frees us. It lets us make mistakes and be okay. The forgiveness story I told with my wife's sweet story, that frees us to become better than we are. And I wish we could help our next generation see the power of the church in making our lives richer.
Yeah, thanks.
I was thinking, Greg, if you look at the fundamental needs of humans that can only be filled by God, I think whether it's millennials or whether it's baby boomers, whether it's different cultures, different countries, I think the innate need is the same and it can only be fulfilled by God. So how it's communicated to millennials or other generations is different. But I think if you focus on the core need and how God is the only one who could satisfy that, I think that is the way to get there.
Thanks. Well, we need to wrap up, and let me say on behalf of everybody, thank you so much. I think these are not only bright academic minds, but Philip is got some significant academia behind him as well, but he's somebody who's in the game every day making a new company happen, and I appreciate so much the three of your really connected ideas, even though you've never met before. And did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.